So we are down right now at the Foss Waterway Seaport. As you know, the last remaining section of what was once a mile-long grain warehouse. And this is currently the staging ground for a massive model train event. You guys can come on down, check it out, get to see all of the model trains, and if you're really into the experience, you'll actually get to hear the trains rolling by outside. It's just an immersive thing across the board. What's cool about this place too is that because it's in that original grain warehouse, just the smells and the sounds can transport you on the express line to amazement. Tonight we're going to take you guys around, let you take a look at a lot of the model trains, and then give you some of the history of the area so that you get to explore the roots of this place. Because what's so incredible is the rails to sails history of this area, and specifically this building. So let's take a look.
Well, you heard it from that man himself. Welcome, everyone. We are very excited to have you all here tonight for our virtual experience of the Rails to Sails model train exhibit down at the Foss Waterway Seaport. I will be joined this evening by our education liaison, Julia Berg, who is down in the seaport right now, and she is going to walk us around and tell us a little bit about what's going on. Julia, how's it going?
It's wonderful. Hi, Chris. My name is Julia Berg. I'm the Director of Education at the Foss Waterway Seaport. So I'm going to turn the camera around now so that you can see what's in the building. Give me 1 second.
Awesome.
And we're going to look off this direction.
There we go.
All right. So there we have the huge train layout behind us. I'm going to go ahead and walk over there and find out what is going on. So this is going to be here all weekend. Thursday, that's the day. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 10 to 4. This is Bud Bronson, who's a volunteer here at the Thompson, who's also a volunteer here at the Seaport. You want to tell us a little bit about this layout?
Sure. This is a Rails to Sails layout because we, at the last minute, added, it took 6 weeks to do this, and they used email to communicate, 4 or 5 guys, and they built this model of a ferry. And so they've got the ferry that loads on one side, and then goes across the other side and unloads. They've got the chains, everything is all to scale on here with the chain. Captain standing up there.
That's awesome. And so what's cool is they came in yesterday, everything fit in that trailer back there in the corner. And do you want to tell them about how this is put together?
This is all, most of them are 4-foot modules, and they're built to a national standard, so we can take these anywhere in the United States and they'll fit to any other model of the same type. They're all put together, the wiring is the same, everything is the same, so that it works in tandem with each other.
So Chris, so you can see right here, this is an example of one module. Starts right here and finishes over here. And each one of these is built by a different person.
Right.
And they have really neat scavenger hunts on them. So that in each module you can look and try to find these little teeny tiny, yeah, this one has a little campfire in it. Put your finger back there, Bud, so they can see the scales of this. So it's N scale. It's
so
tiny.
Small.
Yeah, and I know Chris wanted to ask you a question, which is, what is so addictive about model railroading?
It's history in miniature. It's something you can do that reminds you of the past, and it teaches you all kinds of things, electrical work and painting and woodwork. You do all that stuff in model railroading, and you get together with other people that are just great to work with and enjoy the same thing. And it just, I've been doing this since I was 7. That's only, I don't know, 70 years ago.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right, so Mr. Thompson and I, sorry, Bud Bronson is with the Odyssey. I may have been working too much. Are going to head over here to what's part of our permanent railroad exhibit. So the exhibit that we just showed you is only here for this weekend. But over here we have both our G scale. That last one was N scale, is the tiny one. And then G scale is this bigger one right here. And you can actually, if you come in, you can push this switch right here and the train will move, except for it's off the track. We'll just pretend. There it goes. Whee! And there's going to be something super special on Sunday here, which Bud will tell you about.
Yeah, we have a group of people that have live steam, real steam engines that will fit on this G-scale track. They've been here before for special events, and they're coming in because Sunday is the last day for this layout to be here. It's going to be moving, and we're redoing the whole exhibit. You'll have to come in and see it now and then see what it's like when it's all changed.
Perfect. And then finally, we have over here our other permanent exhibit, or has been our permanent exhibit, which is the HO scale of the Half Moon Yard. And if you haven't been in here in a while, they added a mural of City Hall, and you can look, if you can barely see through the window, and I know Chris has a better picture of it, that's actually City Hall up on the hill behind us.
I'll see if I can get the picture of it here.
All right, so now we're going to show you some of the other things that are around just for this weekend. Thank you, Bud.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to head over here through the exhibit. I'm taking a secret shortcut that's not open yet. Don't tell anybody. We're going to duck over here, around here. And then we have Kayla from the education department who is modeling one of our awesome photo booths. So you can come down here with your family, grab some props. This is all free. You can sit on that bench. And ta-da, you want to stand in front of the there, and she's on the train. Okay, and then hey, there's us. And the rest of the museum, as always, we have our whale skeleton, lots of historic boats. There's some special stuff out only this weekend for children. This is here all the time. You can come and play on, children and adults. And we've added some props for this to be a second photo booth. There's always the Faith that you can play on. And then over here, we have a couple of special setups just for this weekend, which is some train hats and coloring. There's a small wooden train set that's out. And it looks like the kids have made an incredible tower here out of the Port of Tacoma shipping containers and blocks. So that's all out just for this weekend only. We have some boat building going on right now for Third Thursday. And then this is Fallon, one of our volunteers, who also happens to be the goalkeeper for the women's soccer team OL Reign, and will be starting tomorrow at Lowen Field. Woo woo! And she is here docenting our touch tanks, which will be available all weekend as well.
Super awesome. Yeah, if you guys want to come down, we have a bunch of sea stars, super awesome sea anemones, and my personal favorite, the ultra cute Brent Sculpin that likes to hop around. So really cool animals here to see that all belong in the Puget Sound. So really cool local animals.
Awesome. Thank you, Fallon. All right, Chris, I think that's all we have. So back over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Julia. Good luck, Rain, and I appreciate you being available for this today. So you've got to take a look around and get sort of an idea for what's going on. And this is a massive model train exhibit that's down at the seaport right now. And it's going to be there through Sunday. So if you go within the next hour, it's the free Thursday. So admission is free and you get to see the model trains. For the remainder of the weekend, it's 10 to 4, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And you get to see everything included with your admission. And if you're a member, you get to just walk in the door. And they have, they're in the process of sort of refurbishing and sprucing up the train exhibit that is naturally inside the seaport. And they are just going to have the model one out there on the floor for the next few days. And it's so important that it's there for a variety of reasons. I love what Bud said about it being history in miniature, because that is such a beautiful and tangible way of looking at the entire thing. And that's what it is. So I want to show you guys the importance of the railroad to the area here. I feel like I talk about this often, but I don't think that I talk about it enough. That when you think Tacoma, you have to think trains. the whole reason that the city ends up here, the city of Tacoma, is because of the railroad. And this is an important time to acknowledge that before Tacoma, this was the traditional lands of the Puyallup. And so we always like to acknowledge that in their own words.
Ati duf ati swatwiftud atis Puyallupabs, a slathlasil, alti disha tu alturi tuha.
It is the land right here that the Puyallup people have lived on since the beginning.
This
right here is where we are in the world, our homelands.
Uyayus chas atiswa tufted atis tu ishachas. Ukachachas tis badadachas. Uoch twati halalt atiswa tufted atis Puyallupabs.
We work on our ancestral lands. We raise our children who go to school on the land of the Puyallup people.
Ohegwad chas ti shwananam tliti, ohashitab ti pasted okwaredu.
We acknowledge that the Medicine Creek Treaty was signed for the whites to take our land for their benefit. Ohashitab chas ati shwananam tliti ati swatwiftud chas. Otsuti pasted squat lup swatwiftud lup.
Land was assigned to our people. The Caucasians said, "This is your land," and they took that land from us too.
Our land was stolen from us. Treaties were broken.
But we are still here today. Our people forage for food and materials, we pick berries, we canoe, we practice our traditional ways, and we speak Twelshutsi.
Just as our ancestors did.
We are finished.
I think the complicated history of this region is well represented with inside the Foss Waterway Seaport, with the Puyallup tribes' history in the area, as well as the railroad coming in, and then the reason that clash happened here in Tacoma is truly the deepwater port and the shallow tidelands. So if you look at a topographic map of the Tacoma area, it is the picturesque fantasy of a railroad man with that shallow grade on the tide flats coming straight up to a naturally deep water port. It's as if it was designed in their own imagination, the geography of this place. And so here is a picture sort of the grand fantasy of what Tacoma was going to be for the world. You see the mountain in the background there. That's actually Stadium High School in its grandness right there, sort of in the middle, just left of center. You can see Old City Hall's clock tower just above that there. And then, of course, a major prominent part of the cityscape here are those rail yards right down there on the water. And so when I say you got to think trains when you think Tacoma, it's because it's the reason for the city. They put all these ports down here on the waterfront, and then you could literally, you can see it in the picture here, drive a train right up to the side of a ship. There didn't have to be a third party involved. You could take cargo from a train on a ship or vice versa. And all of the economic and political power of Tacoma resonated like a shockwave out of that epicenter there. So what you're looking at with this one, on the left-hand side of your screen is that mile-long warehouse, of which the Foss Waterway Seaport is the last remaining chunk, untouched since it was built in the early 1900s. And then just up the hill, you've got the Northern Pacific Railroad Terminus headquarters. That's the building with the round tower at the top. And then across the street from it, of course, Old City Hall and its prominent clock tower. And when you look at Tacoma today, what I love is that it has stayed true to its roots as a railroad town. We have a tremendous amount of train traffic that goes through the city today, a massive train rail yard right on the Port of Tacoma area. And of course, the reason this is all possible is because of the state-of-the-art intermodal system. And in case you're curious what that is, I know I've talked about it before. Essentially, it's these containers, right? They come in 20 and 40 foot sizes. Essentially, you pack it with whatever you want, and then it is industry standard, where you can take it with your machine at your port, pick it up off a ship, put it right on top of a train, and send it out. And when it arrives at whatever rail yard, it can be lifted up and put on the back of a semi. It's like the ubiquitousness of a Lego block, right? You know that it will fit with all other ones. And by designing that way, you streamline transportation, shipping, and of course, making money to the best degree you can. And so the port, because of the railroad, becomes important. Sorry. This all starts early on, though, with the transportation of lumber on the Northern Pacific Railroad, which then becomes the Union Pacific, which eventually will be bought out by Burlington Northern, which will then become BNSF, which is the trains that operate in Tacoma today. And the passion for trains is something that has been burning in the hearts of the standard Tacoman from the dawn of time. These are model railroaders Hubert Kraft on the left and Francis Gaiman on the right. They are businessmen in the city of Tacoma back in, I think the 1920s. And this was just their passion project, was making replicas of Tacoma's railroad inside their house. And this was, I believe, a 25-member group that was doing this particular model here, and they were avid train crafters. This is Harold Bortle. What a phenomenal name. He was a Tacoma police officer in the 1950s, and he was also an avid train enthusiast. And what I love is that these historic photos were noteworthy enough to end up in the digital archives of the Tacoma Public Library. The zeal for trains is something that is palpable in this city. Perhaps no more so than with this fine gentleman right here. This is Mr. Paul Myers. And this picture was taken in 1981 when he was 81 years old. And he had been a part of the railroad from the very first moment that it was possible. He was a train enthusiast throughout his childhood. He got hired on with the Great Northern Railway when he was a teenager and worked for 49 years for the railroad until he retires in 1966 and then becomes a travel agent specializing in booking people travel on trains. And after his retirement from that, he becomes an avid member of the Rotary Club and, of course, one of the founding members of the, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was like the Pacific Northwest Railmen's Association. He just lived in Tacoma and created these model trains. And that's an important transition there, his life, because I think when we think of trains, especially now, we really think of the industrial and shipping aspect of trains, but really, the trains that made Tacoma famous and a lucrative city were not just the industrial blue-collar trains out there shipping lumber and cargo from sea to shining sea. It was actually tourism that played a huge role in that. This is a picture from 1925 where the Hotel Winthrop, which you may recognize, it's just across from the Pantages Theater. It's an apartment building today. Served as a tourism office, and people would arrive here to Tacoma on a ship and then could embark on the train to Mount Rainier. And that's such an important part of the Tacoma story because as Tacoma was developed as a railroad town, they took what was called East Gulch, which is essentially that ravine that runs in between like the Lincoln District and McKinley today. It's still an active train line that follows along that spur line off of Interstate 5, but it was the first line to the newly minted national park, Mount Rainier. And people would arrive from all around the world on ships down to the port of Tacoma. They would stay in the hotels of Tacoma, and then they would catch this little line started by the Northern Pacific Railroad out to Mount Rainier. And originally, it only went as far as Ashford, which is pictured here in 1905. That's 62 miles of rail line that had to be constructed just in the first couple of years there. And in the first year, they sold roughly 32,000 tickets for $6 a passenger. That's in 1905. Can you imagine the money industry that was? And it was tourism, right? They were taking people out to Mount Rainier. Absolutely a national treasure. So this is a picture from 1873. This was labeled Tacoma, the terminus of the Northern Pacific Railroad. And this is what they were working with when they arrived here to terraform Tacoma into a train town. Within just a couple years, it transformed into this. So this is at 809 Pacific Avenue. This is in 1890. Bear this in mind. 1873, 1890. And in that time, they completely transformed the city of Tacoma. And it was easy to do, relatively easy, mind you, because you could ship in any supplies that you needed on a ship like this. And you can see the close proximity to the train. So this is looking south on the Northern Pacific Railroad along Commencement Bay. This would have been essentially just south of where Stadium High School is today. And so basically looking at the plot of land that would soon become the Foss Waterway Seaport building. And they had already started bringing in some steamships by this point in the 1880s. But the tremendous amount of shipping would have still been tall ships. As you can see right down here, this is also 1885 on the Commencement Bay, basically that same area that we were looking at there earlier. And tall ships were really the mode of transportation for international cargo at that time, because you didn't have to worry about burning fuel all the way across the vast expanse of the Atlantic or the Pacific. And so as these ships were arriving here, they sort of built the city around that, so much so that the Foss Seaport, the Foss Waterway, so to speak, is designed so that you can 360 a tall ship in it, that you can sail it in with the winds of Commencement Bay, rope it up down at the dock, and then onload, offload cargo, catch that prevailing wind out of the south to flip that bad boy back around, and then out to sea, past Seattle, out into the Pacific. And I've got some contemporary footage here so you can see kind of what we're looking at. So this is the railroad as it is today. This goes up to 705, and then there you see Old City Hall, the Northern Pacific Railroad headquarter building, and then Rock the Dock, and on the other side is the Foss Seaport Museum. And this section right here in our view was originally called Half Moon Bay. They filled it in enough and it became Half Moon Yard, a switching yard where you could change out the different cargoes on trains. You could take a section of the train off, replace it with a different section, and it was the largest switching yard west of the Mississippi for its basically the entire career there. You can also see the grain silos down there, which are remarkable, especially because that's a legacy to the grain shipping industry out here. Grain is still the #1 export from the port of Tacoma, though today I believe it's soy. I think soy has overtaken all of the other grains that are exported from here. But just like they always have, they arrive on a train, they go on a ship, off around the world. And we've got some really good images of that process. So this would be the tide flats in 1900. You can see Rainier in the background there. And you really see how young the city was at the time. So in 1888, they installed the Northern Pacific Railroad headquarters building, pictured right there. And this predates Old City Hall by about 5 years. Obviously, not long after that, they put in that grand Italianesque building with its clock tower there. And you can see this is how you would come up basically from 705 onto Pacific Avenue today. Here it is from another angle. This would be when the Great White Fleet visited Tacoma. It was a Theodore Roosevelt idea, I believe, to have a massive armada made with a lot of guns on them, and then paint them all white as a symbol of universal peace around the world, and then send them on a big tour so that everybody could see how big the guns of our peace were. Right here is a cool sort of blending. This is of the original Northern Pacific building, and you can see how little it has really changed over the last 130 years, almost 140, geez. And here it is as it's from a different angle, kind of getting constructed. You can actually see the spire. I believe that's St. Luke's Episcopal, which was in downtown Tacoma before it got deconstructed and then moved to its current place in sort of the North Tacoma area. And what I love are the action shots here, right? So this is taken just outside of what is now the Foss Seaport building. You can see people unloading and offloading cargo onto those tall ships, which have just been backed right up to the dock. And when you look at Washington State wheat production over the last 100 years, you can see why this became such a prominent area. And it was so easy to take that from the train onto a ship. And so this is inside. Basically, this is right where the model trains are set up inside that building today. It still has those same trestle-built construction of the ceiling up there. And you can see how that used to just be storage for grain. Today, they use a little more modern technique with the grain silos that you got to see down there earlier. But the same idea has really carried us throughout. And what I love about looking at Port of Tacoma is that it has stayed so consistent. The two big things that we operate for Port of Tacoma aren't just import-export, but tourism. We are still the gateway to Mount Rainier. And while you don't take the train from Tacoma out there, that I-5 corridor is the way to go. And instead of staying in Seattle, a lot of people take the time to come stay in Tacoma, have a hotel here, eat, drink, be merry, and then they rally out to Rainier, do their hiking, camping, exploration, and then come back to Tacoma, which was the original design from the 1880s. And I think when people see it today, they forget that that was an intentional legacy, that the way the Tacoma area was terraformed and geoscaped was designed specifically with that trade in mind. And the things that have changed are the ones that are pretty crazy. So this is downtown Tacoma in 1904. It looks pretty similar to this right now. I think if you were to colorize this photo, you would be shocked at how similar it still is. The biggest thing that's missing is probably that spire in the background there. That used to be the courthouse building, which was eventually demolished in the mid-1900s. But the Northern Pacific Railroad was the main economic engine of the area for a long time there. And while the name of the companies has changed over the last 100 years, the industry has remained very consistent. Northern Pacific Railroad was the first big one. It later became the Union Pacific. The Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific Railroad were in the area pretty much through the 60s and the 80s, and then eventually it turns over into Burlington Northern, which then merges into BNSF. But on South Tacoma Way, right? So this is from 1908. You see the railroad industry in its glory down there. All of these brick buildings were steam engine repair and manufacturing shops. And it was the main thing that was done down in that area. And to give you a glimpse at that, I love this picture. This is a twin locomotive cylinder. This is for that front engine of the train. It's essentially where the pistons would go. And this is being manufactured and then repaired. All of the repairs west of the Mississippi took place here in Tacoma for every steam train out there. And then eventually for a lot of the diesel trains as well. And that's something to bear in mind, is that it wasn't until 1974 that the last train left a repair shop on South Tacoma Way, and they just sort of erased that area so that you wouldn't know what was there today. There's a few warehouses kind of down there, but all of the buildings that were built as auxiliary to that industry, restaurants, hotels, theaters, the buildings that show up to take care of a community that takes care of the trains, those all remain in remarkably historically preserved condition down there on South Tacoma Way. And in fact, if you go down there right now, you might recognize this building. This is kind of just off of, I think it's 56th. And this is what it looks like today. It's an events rental space. Here it is from another angle, right next to what is still a shipping warehouse for the railroad. The tracks run right through here. And this is what it looked like in its heyday. Sometimes literally a heyday. Terrible puns tonight. I'm so sorry. But you could ship things back and forth. You could roll them from one warehouse to the other through this elevated walkway over here. And you can see the train track just on the other side. Some places that have changed. So if you look down here, kind of where the Foss Waterway Seaport logo is up at the top of this photograph, that is actually labeling the Seaport building as it is today. But what you can see here, the 11th Street drawbridge, our Murray Morgan Bridge, that's that uppermost bridge there. Directly south of that was the 15th Street Railroad Bridge. And that's missing. A lot of people don't even know that it used to exist there, but it was a pivoting bridge. It could turn and connected Port of Tacoma to downtown Tacoma. And you can see just how interlaced the trains were. I mean, the train tracks are still there today, but they definitely carried up into the downtown section significantly more than they do today. And if you go like the UW campus, University of Washington, Tacoma campus, right downtown Tacoma, their interpretive walking trail, the Prairie Line Trail, is a spur line designed to take, a massive 10-wheeled steam or diesel engine up into the heart of downtown Tacoma, where it could onload and offload cargo. And that was the heart. It's the very story of Tacoma at its most basic level, I think. Here's an example of one of the early steam locomotives that would have operated around the area. These were very short-lived. By the time the terminus was established in 1873, they were using much larger and stronger engines through the area there. And our original train station was actually down on the waterfront. So a little bit north of where the seaport is today, kind of closer to where the grain silos are, pretty much just down the hill from Stadium High School, was kind of the original train station of Tacoma. By 1911, though, the city had grown so much and there was so much train activity throughout Tacoma that they're like, man, we got to do something. And they're like, you know what? Why don't we get Reed and Stem, the same guys who were doing Grand Central Terminal over in New York? And at the time, it made perfect sense because Tacoma was the boomiest of boom towns. And their solution to our traffic problem was to build Union Station. So this shows up in 1911. It's now on our historic register of national places. It is currently, in case you didn't know, a federal courthouse. But you can see it has changed so little over the years. For a brief period of time there in the 1980s, it was vacant until it got purchased by the federal government, refurbished to its original grandeur, and then turned into the courthouse. And today, out front, you'll see the bronze statue by local artist Larry Anderson of the quintessential Tacoma businessman waiting for the train out here to pursue their destiny. And what I love, I think, is a little known fact that Union Station is considered one of the 3 domes of Tacoma. It is one of the 3 famous rotundas that we have. Mount Tahoma or Mount Rainier is the biggest and most prominent. The Tacoma Dome, the second largest wooden dome in the world. And then, of course, Union Station. And they line up pretty nicely to give a pretty good sky view there. And I do always want to take a spur line from our main conversation here to say that while Tacoma is technically the world's second largest wooden dome, followed only by the Superior Dome in Michigan, I think is what it's called, which is only wider in diameter by about 6 feet. The Tacoma Dome has a seating capacity of several thousand more than the Superior Dome. So I would say that it is still the grandest wooden dome in the world. And anyone who wants to fight me on it can. But I've been sidetracked. What we're talking about is the prominence of trains, transportation, and travel in the area. And so here, this is in the train exhibit inside the Foss Waterway Seaport Museum. This is the one that is normally on display down there. And it represents that Half Moon Bay that we were talking about there. And this is what Half Moon Bay, Half Moon Yard look like today. And this is just outside the front window of the seaport. And what I love about that is that they have a museum dedicated to trains and ships, sandwiched right between trains and ships, because it was the main hub for transportation and cargo storage. And I don't think that happens very often. And I don't think it gets stressed enough in what we talk about. You know, it's like when you go to Europe and you have a museum on medieval warfare in a castle that was under siege. It's so much rarer, I think, here, especially on the West Coast in the United States, to have a museum that has a rich legacy and history as a functional building, then represent that history in a contemporary and tasteful way. And so being there, being able to hear the train and see the ships and smell the salt air and then see it there, it's like a 4D theater. It's really a very cool way to get to explore it. And one of the things that you'll get to see if you go down and check out the model railroad is that they have that ferry, the MV Tacoma. And that is probably my favorite part of the whole setup right now. Let me see if I've got a little clip of it right here. Okay, so you briefly got to see their setup of the ferry there, the MV Tacoma. I love that because it's such a sketchy part of history that people don't talk about, but you get to see it in action down there. And let me explain to you. So back in the day, right? So you come across the country, you don't have to take the Oregon Trail and die from dysentery. You now ride on your streamlined steam engine from Chicago to Tacoma. You're looking very dapper, but let's say, hey, you want to go to Portland. Well, no problem. You can take a train from Tacoma down to Portland or California if you want. But there's a serious problem that no one's addressed yet, and it's called the Columbia River, the death trap of the Pacific Northwest. It's hard to get a ship through the Columbia even today. I think there's 9 licensed ship pilots who can actually take people through the bar. It's terrifying, and especially at the time. So what do these guys come up with? They're like, you know what? Here's what we'll do. Why don't we take a steam train and put it on a freaking ferry? So sure enough, they build a ferry that can connect to the rail line, and then some ballsy engineer has to drive the train onto the ferry, keep that engine hot as they go across the Columbia River, rope up to the other ferry dock, and then that train disembarks from there down south through Portland and then eventually California. And no, knowing what I do from all my years serving on ships at sea and my limited knowledge of trains, no part of me wants to see this in action. But this was something that they used to do before the construction of the bridge spanning the Columbia River. You would take a ferry across, and for a brief time there, they had one, I think, in eastern Washington, up sort of in the Kettle Falls area, but on a significantly smaller scale because they were able to complete the railroad on its main line through Spokane, Elmira, Creston, over through Stampede Pass, and then down into the Tacoma area. Relatively easy, once again. So no need for the super sketchy ferry. But for a while, that was the thing that they did. Trains on boats, which is the true rails to sails experience. Although I guess it's rails to steam. But that doesn't have quite the same appeal to it. To give you a little look at the legacy here too. So this is the Seaport building when it was a cash and carry back in 60s, I think. I think during the 1960s is when it was the cash and carry, but I need to double check that. And this is the Seaport building when it was connected to all her sister buildings, like the Tacoma Municipal Dock building. And each of these was part of that mile-long warehouse that had been built down there in 1901. And what was so cool about all this was that while they were connected, they were also separate. And this is important to our story because they each had a brick firewall that you could pass through a small door in between them. Because for those of you who have ever dealt with large amounts of grain or who've had a sack of flour around a Christmas bonfire, that stuff goes up real fast, especially that flour or wheat dust can catch fire and combust very readily. And so to stack a wooden structure with a ton of flour, from those of you who have seen anything about Tacoma's waterfront in the 1930s, can be disastrous. Luckily, those brick firewalls managed to save this last remaining section, which is what we have down here today, and left a piece of history down there. And what I like about it, here's a picture of the model, right? So when you go into the seaport, they have a model of the seaport connected to the railroad. You can walk outside the window or the front door and see this, almost exactly this shot, because the train still operates just across the street on the main line. But the museum has gone through recently and excavated the original tracks. So as you're entering or exiting the Seaport building, right on the side there, what seems impossibly close are the original tracks that those cargo trains would come up on. And you can see it was easy. You could just hand something in and out from the boxcar into the warehouse or vice versa. And yeah, I'm saying easy to lift, I don't know, a 60 to 80 pound bag of wheat back and forth, but easier than having to load it all up on like a hand cart, take it around somewhere and do whatever. So it was not as easy as our intermodal system is today, but certainly for the time period, absolutely revolutionary. And that's why this area became so important, so prominent, and continues to today. So this is from 1922, I believe, looking across the Foss Waterway at the Foss Waterway Seaport Museum, which at the time would have been the Balfour Dock building, as it was called. This is from 6 years ago. And even today, tall ships come and tie up at the dock and continue to showcase that story of seafaring around the world. And I can't stress enough how much of an international port Tacoma was. I know that Seattle gets a lot of claims to fame as it is the bigger and more notable city right now, but that wasn't the case. At the time, if you were going to bring a ship in, the majority of them were coming down here to Tacoma. And a lot of it had to do with the ease of the railway. There was more railroad infrastructure built in and around Tacoma and made it easier to import, export cargo, as well as bring people in for various amounts of tourism. And so while people were going around visiting places like Anderson Island, Mount Rainier, the Cascades, they would arrive here first in Tacoma via ship from across the world. As far away as Europe and Japan, they would arrive here on the very docks that people now show up here. So like when the cruises, like American Cruise Line has a little one that goes around the Puget Sound, and they show up here on the dock in Tacoma at the Seaport building. And I love just the parallels. Like you could put the pictures together, 120 years apart, and it would be really very, very similar. So this is an opportunity for you guys now to go down to the Seaport, like I said, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. tomorrow, Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday. Those next 3 days from 10 to 4, the Seaport is going to be open, and all these guys are down there having constructed this detailed, absolutely stunning model railroad down there. And it's not just history in miniature, it is a scavenger hunt extraordinaire. Like Julia was saying early on, they've set up these little scavenger hunt sheets. And so as you're looking through the different constructions of railroads around the area, you can be on, as is evidenced by number 7 here, literally a wild goose chase, looking for various items down there, and they are small. I was down there earlier this morning, and it is tiny. So let me double check with all you guys, because you've been great. It's been so good to have you guys check in tonight, and I hope that you guys get the opportunity to go down to the seaport and experience it. For me, it's always a tremendous pleasure being able to bring the virtual programs literally into your guys' living rooms, dens, and offices. But I think there's something exciting too about actually getting down there. And because I've said it like 30 times tonight, how incredible it is to see and smell everything down there, this is a good opportunity. There are a lot of other opportunities down there. So if you're going down with your kids, like Julie was saying early on, there's a lot of spaces for them to play on ships and to just explore around, see the touch tanks, see a whale skull, see a haunted dive suit, and experience true train history on a functional train yard right here in the gem of the Pacific Northwest, Tacoma. A city that's still gritty, but always pretty. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to cut you guys loose so that you can go enjoy your evening, but I hope to see some of you, if not all of you, down at the seaport this weekend. If you have questions, comments, let me know. We are always around, both the seaport and myself, with Pretty Gritty Tours, trying to answer anything that we can along the way. And if there's something we don't know, I promise we'll investigate, find an answer, and get back to you. So until next time, my friends, get out there, keep on exploring. Have a great night. Talk to you soon.